Welcome to today's program. This is another edition of the program Innovation Unedited through the City College of New York, and specifically today from the studios of WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. I'm Angelo Lampousis from the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences here at City College of New York. It's my privilege to introduce our guest today, Mr. Richard Fuller, founder and director of the Pure Earth Institute, formerly known as Blacksmith Institute. Mr. Fuller, Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Angela. Lovely to be here.
Richard is the author of the book The Brown Agenda, and he's here with us today to talk about his book, but also his progress in solving some of the world's most complicated problems, I would think, including contaminated sites of immense magnitude. It's really hard to conceive some of these. And this past semester, through the Macaulay Honors Program, we had the opportunity to explore some of these sites, most of them from literature from Pure Earth and the Blacksmith Institute. And we really discovered something about ourselves, discovering information about this project. So again, thank you for being with us. And if you would share with us, first of all, information about your book.
It's really a treat to come here, especially to hear that students have been following this work, and it gives me this sense that we're going to make it, you know. if the future students of CUNY are moving in that path, it's really terrific. So the book has been came out this year in August. It's written in two parts. First of all, a background on how I got into this field and some of the stories that brought me along the path from leaving my hometown in Melbourne, Australia, where I was working for IBM and doing very well and being that corporate blue stripe guy, to going to the rainforests of the Amazon and setting up some national parks there. Kind of an odd but interesting group of experiences that involved shaman rituals in the rainforest and traveling on boats up strange little creeks and things. And then I ended up back in New York, starting a for-profit business called Great Forest, which does sustainability advisory consulting for a good part of the large companies in this particular region. And from there, I then started this work in pollution in low and middle income countries. So that whole kind of story is there. I hope it's entertaining. Did you find it entertaining?
I find it immensely interesting. It is what they call it, a page-turner, for sure.
Oh, nice, yeah.
But most importantly to me was the realization through this book. You get this very early on, but definitely when you turn on this last page, you realize, everyone is familiar with the plagues of the world, malaria and tuberculosis and things like that. And they have received a lot of attention, and I believe in some African countries, some of these issues have been addressed. I don't remember the country. There is one country in Africa I was reading that they have less HIV prevalence than we have, because it has received so much attention that international donors have saturated perhaps this one issue with so much funding. But this type of attention doesn't come anywhere close to the effects of things like chemical contamination for large populations of this planet. So it was really fascinating to just comprehend the volume of this thing.
Yeah, and the second half of the book really is describing all of these issues that relate to the pollution agenda in some detail, and talking mostly about where there are solutions to see these things. But you're right, the first and most important point that is just unknown for the majority of the population is the enormous public health scope of this. And pollution in the US really got pretty well addressed in the 60s and 70s. Lots of great regulations, lots of terrific watchdog groups who've been there to make sure governments have been on track. And we dropped it off our radar somewhat. But in parallel to that, this extraordinary industrial economic boom that's gone on in low and middle income countries, where they've grown at a fabulous rate, but without having addressed pollution at all. And now we kind of wake up and go out and look and do the numbers, and pollution is easily the single largest public health problem in the world, and it far eclipses the burden of disease from HIV or malaria or tuberculosis. In fact, it's 3 times the size of those 3 combined. So it's almost 9 million deaths a year, whereas HIV is about 1.4 million deaths per year. That's a little kind of odd to calculate something according to how many people die, because really it's about the individuals who are living in these places, who are exposed to bad air or contaminated soil or bad drinking water. But the numbers are really off the charts.
So one thing that comes very clearly off the book and off your work is definitely this awareness aspect of things. And I'm my own witness of that, because I felt I felt my awareness being raised tremendously after reading this book and after meeting some of your board members, the members of your technical advisory. We will talk about them later. But another aspect of your work is specifically, explicitly, how do you go about addressing these issues? And there, too, the Pure Earth Institute, and formerly the Blacksmith Institute, has a long track record of successes.
A few failures.
And failures.
Learnable ones.
It will be good to share whatever you could about this, because it seems like you have, over the years, developed an approach that perhaps is pioneering, or sometimes the first that...
I hate to think that, because it always looks to me like common sense. It's very engineering-based strategies. But we do have a very simple way of looking at these issues and trying to solve them. And it basically, first of all, involves identifying an issue, measuring it, measuring the level of contamination, measuring that contamination in an exposure pathway to humans. So we're looking for the soil that children are playing on, or the drinking water, chemicals in the drinking water, or air quality, at a level, at a place where you would be breathing it. And then having measured it, then defining the technical solution, which is actually the easiest part of the equation. Having done that, the difficult stuff is rallying the solution in place. And what we've used there has been a strategy of creating a stakeholder group, all the government agencies, local, national government agencies, the facility owners, if they're there and apparent, or the associations around industry or local business, NGOs, the local technical experts who can be there and assist, and settle them up, show them the problem, measure the public health impact, be able to talk intelligently about what is the burden that's being incurred in this particular city or this particular neighborhood. How many people are affected, at what levels, what does that mean in terms of their life expectancy, in terms of the amount of cancer that is being created here. Does that reflect their reality? It always does. These things are very, very obvious when you're there, and people are really aware that it's a bad problem. And then having got that stakeholder group talking, then we'll bring to it, and by the way, we want them to talk in a way where they're talking about solutions, not in how to punish one another for having created this monster. And in fact, if people start to say, I'm going to sue one or other, we'll calm them right down and say, that won't work. There is a solution. It's not that complicated. I'm sure we can work out how to do this together, but you have to take that off the table. And that's a very important point.
I want to ask, if you don't mind the interruption, that's a very fine line, and I really want to ask you about this. What are the limits of, say, an activist role? Because we just talked about awareness, and there are ways about raising awareness. I'm not going to mention any names of other foundations right now, but there's this activist approach that
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's punitive, but it's definitely you don't make good friends in
It's a different
necessarily.
approach. It's a different approach, yeah,
Okay.
and it's used, in many different countries. There's the modality to try and solve these problems, but it doesn't necessarily work. In fact, it's often counterproductive because it brings people into conflict. It is appropriate in countries where there are already resources and institutes that bear responsibility. So it's very appropriate that this activist response be here in the West. But when you're working in a place like Zambia, the government capacity is so limited, or Bangladesh, or even India. India has done so little work in their pollution management. They're really a long way behind. So going out and rallying against the government, as opposed to bringing them technology, support for funding, development assistance with the big international players like the World Bank, those things are what they're actually looking for. And if we focus instead on how do we solve the problem for the children that are being impacted right now, rather than looking for compensation for victims in the past or all these other kind of issues, we end up getting the job done. And that's, for me, that's what we're supposed to be doing. I don't want this stuff in the planet. I think we should be getting it solved. So that being said, activism is a very powerful case for it. But let's do a little more of this kind of project-based solutions and collaborative work, and let the activism be tailored when it's needed. That's how I look at it.
Very good. We have been talking to Richard Fuller of the Pure Earth Institute, formerly known as Blacksmith Institute. I'm Angelo Lampousis from the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences here at the studios of WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Richard, I would like to draw your attention a little bit to the scientific aspect of things. We talked about raising the awareness on the general public type of scale, and you also explained the approach of bringing about some change, working with stakeholders locally. But there's also the science of remediating or site characterization and so on. I know personally at least two of members of your technical board, Professor Jack Caravanos, who is from the CUNY School of Public Health, a colleague of mine, and also I know Nicholas Albergov because we're in the same committee for the American Society of Testing and Materials, and we've met there last October in the ASTM meeting. Both of them, I know of their work. Although we're in the same field, I don't have, this lifetime is not enough for me to catch up with them in terms of how advanced they are, these guys. But how do you go about finding these good people to work on these projects?
I think mostly they found us.
Okay.
But it's interesting, very early on in the design work of focusing our efforts on actually creating change and solving problems, we realized we needed best technical advice possible. And so we initiated this group, a technical advisory board, and had a former head of the World Bank's Environment Group head that up, a chap called David Hanrahan, who's based in London and working with us. And when we started doing programs and projects in different countries, we would go out and find whoever it was that had the best technical know-how in that area, and we would approach them and say, look, here's a problem of 3 orders of magnitude worse than anything you've done anywhere in the US. Can you come and help us? And by the way, we can't pay you, but we can cover your expenses. What do you think? I can't believe it, but without exception, everyone said absolutely. And we've had this cadre of now 40 or 50 brilliant, capable experts who donate their time really to serve the common good. And I'm just so proud of them, and they are the backbone of making sure that the work we've done is to the standards that need to be there. We have to set a standard here when we're working in these countries. We're usually the only pollution management effort that's going on there outside of sanitation. So we need to make sure that when they do something, they do it to the standard that will last and will be appropriate for moving forward. So we're bringing all of that with us when we use this group of people, and they're just a wonderful, exceptional group. I assume you're joining it now. You definitely need to.
Well, I am convinced from what I've seen so far, but sure, thank you. So we talked about raising awareness. We talked about approaching the stakeholders on a local level and the scientific aspect. Would you walk us through just a couple of examples of how things played out in a real situation?
Yeah. So I've just come from reviewing a project that's going on in Zambia right now that just came to mind because of what we've been doing this afternoon. It's a town just outside of the capital called Kabwe. A lead smelter opened up there in 1908. Was operated by Anglo-America very early on, or its predecessor. Then was taken over by the Zambian government when Kaunda came in and it became nationalized. Operated for another 30 or 40 years and finally closed down about 10 years ago, more or less. All of that time, zero pollution controls whatsoever. Mining very rich lead ores nearby and polluting the entire town. So the town is built around the smelter, literally. Downwind, there are a couple of 100,000 people there where soil levels in backyards measure 10, 15,000 ppm, 50,000 ppm for a lot of it. And children have average blood lead levels of around 75 micrograms per deciliter. So we're working there in a sequential manner. We need to bring in large-scale financing to solve this problem because it's a very large. It's easily the most contaminated lead problem in the world, and it's a very large site that's going to need a lot of investment. But in order for that investment to be put in, they need to know what to ask for. The local government, the municipality, and the national authorities need to know what they can actually do in order to be able to solve this problem. So first we brought the World Bank in. The World Bank is willing to put up an undefined large amount of money to solve this problem. And second, we've gone in to do pilot work. So we've gone into about 50 homes in one of the neighborhoods that's very badly affected. And we've been protecting these homes from high levels of lead by doing a capping. We've been laying down a barrier, a permeable barrier, and then putting 25 or 30 centimeters of clean soil that has lead only at 10 parts per million instead of 10,000 parts per million, and tamping it down and measuring all of this with a batch of XRFs, using local labor to do all of this. As a baseline, we measured all of these kids' blood lead levels to start. We'll measure them in another month or so and see how the decline looks. And this model is being done by the local municipality, the people that will borrow the money from the World Bank, with them overseeing and watching. We've been helping them to write their application to the bank to be able to go out and borrow this money and replicate this through the rest of the town. So that's it's going to take 2 years, I think, but light at the end of the tunnel. I think this place, give it a couple of years. Come and talk to me then. See how it goes.
I certainly will. And in fact, we're neighbors. The headquarters of Pure Earth Institute is only a few blocks from City College of New York, so we're practically neighbors. I had a closing question, if you would. This has been a very informative interview, and I cannot resist but think of ways, or trying to think of ways that we can help from a academic or educational point of view, if you would. And we have been trying some things out, but I wonder if you would have any advice for educators and students alike that they would like to get involved in something like this?
Well, there's nothing like actually picking up and going somewhere and seeing what you can do just by being there and asking the right questions and thinking from an engineer's perspective, what do we do to solve this issue? So I firmly encourage people to do that and just go out and volunteer and help. I'm also thinking within the academic sphere that we're talking to here, there is a lack of institutional knowledge about especially contaminated sites, toxicity issues, out in all of these countries. And I'm wondering if we can't create a curricula that might be of value, that could be, very appropriately given and directed out, web-based, into these countries to really help to educate a lot of people about where these dangers lie. Certainly, pitching at the right level is appropriate and could be useful. But I wonder if that's not a good long-term strategy to think of to be useful. We should talk about that.
We should.
Yeah.
We should. Great. We have been talking to Richard Fuller, president and founder of Pure Earth Institute, formerly known as Blacksmith Institute, author of the book The Brown Agenda, which was published recently. And Richard Fuller was kind to come in person in our studios here at WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. I would like to thank the general manager of the radio station, Angela Harden, for her hospitality throughout the semester, and Christopher Fiore for doing the videotaping and the editing of the program. I'm Angelo Lampousis, your host from the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, and until next time, goodbye.